Let's talk about how we can break down development phases in order to get our desired functionality and get us to a point where we have a product we can sell and release to market and start getting feedback. So just again, we talked a little bit about scope, in a previous lecture, but essentially the requirements you have in your application are going to drive your scope. Whatever is core and, needs to be developed at minimum to the application, that's what we absolutely need to have happen. The nice to haves, the future enhancements, all of that can always be layered in over time. So once we know what our scope is, our core scope is, and what we want in the application, that scope is going to drive the project timeline. So if you start to see that, for example, a development organization or individual developer that you hire tells you, hey, it's going to take a year to go and build this project with 5 people working on it full time. You say, well, I don't have the money for a year of development. I have the money for 6 months of development. One of the things you can look at, one thing you can always look at is trying to get a better price on the development, to have it meet your budget. But if that's not an option, you can say, all right, how do we reduce our scope so that we meet our budget requirements? And that might be there are 10 features that I would like the application to have, but they're not absolutely required for the application to have. So why don't we mark those as nice to have? Let's put the nice to haves in a separate bucket that's going to be developed after our initial round. And maybe now with those 10 items that are out of scope, we can meet our 6-month deadline. Maybe as you're going through and there are 10 items on the enhancement list and you say, well, I would like to at least have some of these done. You can always see, how do we mix and match what we put in scope and pull out of scope so that we still hit our 6-month development timeline or whatever it is that we need to do. So keep in mind that how we change the scope is going to drive what our project timeline looks like. And when the scope exceeds that timeline, let's look at what deliverables and what functionality can we push to a later phase or eliminate from the application in order to meet our desired timeline. So here we have a diagram over to the right on typical project management is going to include time, budget, and scope. And we need to, make sure that we're, balancing these out and, actively managing each of these so that we get to a successful project that's on time, on budget, with a scope that we need. So just keep in mind that there are different things that you can do. You can do a proof of concept where, maybe we have just the functionality built out and maybe we don't have a good user interface to the project, but what we've proven out is that the core application logic can be done, and maybe that's what we need in order to, whether it's convince investors to give us money to, fund the next development cycle, or, whether it's to convince, a partner to fund the next development cycle. Proof of concept really is, just making sure that key application functionality can be done. User interface doesn't have to be pretty. There's also what's called an MVP, or a minimum viable product. This is really like, what can we go to market with? What is the minimum our application needs to do for us to be able to start selling it or start getting users in the system to start giving us feedback. So as you go through, again, if you have a subscription type of product and you need to have users be able to log into the product in order to access it, otherwise you're going to make it open for anybody with the link to to go and use it. You want to avoid something like that, right? So your security, your login, registration page, things like that may be part of your MVP. Maybe some of the logic that you called out as core is part of your MVP. And then as you go through, maybe you include an enhancement or two. Maybe you say, you know what, no enhancements, we want just the core pieces until we've really proven the concept and gotten user feedback or maybe even some sales. Right? Once you have that MVP, then you can start iterating through and going with a phase one. Okay, now let's push a round of 10 new enhancements to the application. Now let's push in another 5. And you can iterate through that way in order to manage the budget of the application. Just keep in mind that if you're hiring freelancers or agencies to go and build out your application, if you tell them, hey, I want to build out this MVP, and then maybe a year later I want to start doing phase 1, and a year after that phase 2, you're not going to be guaranteed to have the same team members building out your phase 1 as whoever built out the MVP. So just keep in mind that the best way for you to maintain the same team throughout the entire course of the project and all the phases is to make sure that there's little or no gaps of time in between when you finish one phase and you move on to the next one. Organizations and freelancers, they're just going to jump to get the next project that they have, and then there's going to be no guarantee that they can come back and help you with that. And then finally, just beware of scope creep. So scope creep occurs when you decide to add more features into your application as development is happening. And usually this happens for good reason, because you look at what's being built. Maybe you see a demo of what the latest features are, and that sparks an idea in your mind of, oh, hey, if it can do this, it can also do that. Let's build that into the application. And when you have one of those kinds of epiphany moments, it can usually be okay. When you have 10 of them or 15 of them, then that can lead to scope creep, where you've introduced too many features into the application in order to continue to meet the existing timeline. So just keep that in mind as you go through that. You really want to have a good balance between time, budget, and scope on your project in order to really be successful. If you have some scope creep and the developer says, hey, you need to add another month to the timeline in order to do this, that may be acceptable to you. It may be something where you say, no, we have to finish on time, and in that case, it could become a matter of, all right, let's put this extra scope that I've thought about onto an enhancement list, and we'll get to that list after we build out our proof of concept or our